From the Roswell Incident, the classic study of UFO contact by Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore. Tonight's episode, UFO Touch and Go at Lake Onega, the Russian connection. From the dusty newspaper files of other decades, we learn of a tremendous and unexplained explosion of a meteor or comet which crashed into Earth from the skies over Siberia in 1908. From the high Andean plateau of South America, reports come to us of a recent fireball that sheared off the top of a mountain in 1979. In 1978, tremendous unidentified booms were heard from over the Atlantic Ocean off the coasts of New Jersey and Virginia. Shattering booms or explosions were also referred to in news reports of the 19th century. The NASA, AEC, FAC, NOAA, Air Force, Coast Guard, Navy, and other concerned agencies have all given explanations of what the booms were not, but failed to establish in each case what they were. Nor have explanations for the following phenomena been satisfactorily established. The Siberian or Tunguska fireball, exploding spaceship, atomic blast, or whatever it was, left no trace of extraterrestrial or meteor core. There remained only a flattened or burned part of the forest, but no crater, a considerable number of dead reindeer, and local legends of a great explosion and residual radiation which lasted throughout the years. Proof of the Andean incident, reputedly in Bolivia, is still as tenuous as the mountain air. While the mighty booms of 1978 off the Atlantic coast may have come from space or from the Earth itself, and besides the above suppositions of possible crashes and explosions from space, there exist other rumors, usually dealing with downed UFOs in the United States, which may, of course, be variants of the original Roswell incident, improved and relocated with retelling. Apparently, nothing further has surfaced in the intervening years which has left a more concrete trace of extraterrestrial visitors than certain burned sections of woodland and the unexplained searing of the desert floor. In the past several years, however, rumors and a certain amount of semi-official documentation have been surfacing in regard to another visitor from space. This one left some concrete proof of its encounter with Earth, during which the UFO apparently suffered an explosion and subsequently struck the Earth before it recovered and was able to resume its path in the sky. There exist certain similarities between this Russian occurrence, which allegedly took place near Lake Onega in the Karelian Associated Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR, and the Roswell Incident. The Lake Onega incident took place in 1961, but only recently have references to it appeared in the West. It is described in UFOs in the USSR, Volume 2, 1975, by Professor Felix Siegel, and in the New Soviet Psychic Discoveries by Grissom Dick Prentice Hall, 1978. Original reports and part of the material relating to the Lake Onega incident described in this chapter was translated directly from the Russian notes of Professor Siegel by William Moore. At the time of this incident were made by Professor Siegel of the Soviet Aviation Institute and Yuri Fomin, a Soviet state engineer. It is noteworthy that before official reports began to be circulated in the Soviet Union, considerable comment on this occurrence had appeared in illegal samizdat, or underground publications, just as if reports of non-official UFO publications in the United States had later been officially credited by the government. The latter has not yet happened. The incident occurred near the now-abandoned village of Antino on the far northern shores of Lake Onega. In the early morning of April 27, 1961, a group of 25 hunters and woodsmen saw an aerial object of unknown origin approach the ground and then collide with it on an inlet bay. According to witnesses, this happened at 8 or 10 a.m. Reported time variation might have been due to several reasons, such as confusion between Moscow and local time, often a problem in the Soviet Union, the probability that the hunters were not wearing watches, and the understandable nervousness of Soviet citizens faced with explosions coming from the sky. But the descriptions of what the witnesses agreed exactly as to what they had seen. The object was oval-shaped, as big as a large passenger plane, and glowed with a blue-green light. It was traveling at a low altitude and at tremendous speed. It was on an east-to-west course when it struck the ground near the northern shoreline of the lake, making a sound like a large explosion and causing considerable damage to the ground and surrounding vegetation. The alarm party of hunters contacted the forest ranger for the district, Valentin Borsky, with an urgent request for his assistance. Borsky arrived on the scene at about 8 the following morning. Further investigation by Borsky revealed that other people in the area had observed the same sequence of events, just as the hunters had. According to witnesses, the object had survived the impact with the Earth and continued westward with a slightly wobbling motion on a trajectory still very close to the ground. Then it had disappeared. All witnesses reported no sound associated with the object except for the noise of the impact itself. Subsequent investigation of the impact site by Borsky and later by a combined civilian-military team from the town of Pevens, with environmental scientist Fyodor Denisov heading the civilian contingent and Soviet Army engineer Major Anton Kopeikin in command of the military section with senior technician Lieutenant Boris Lapunov, revealed that the object's collision with the lakeshore had produced 3 trenches, 1 major one and 2 lesser ones, with accompanying uprooting of vegetation. The impact on the ice itself had smashed a large area of lake ice, overturning several huge chunks of it and throwing a number of other large and small pieces out into the ground. The ice appeared to have acquired an intense green coloring from the impact. The trenches produced on the escarpment along the shore consisted of a major trench some 27 meters long, 15 meters wide, and with a maximum depth of about 3 meters, a second trench starting at the far western end of the first and separated from it by about 5.5 meters, and a third less defined trench some 40 centimeters in width and leading to the lake itself. The escarpment at this point of the lake is inclined at about 60 degrees to the surface of the lake. Beyond the 3 trench-like marks mentioned and the impact damage sustained by the lake ice, there appeared to be no other evidence of collision in the area. A close examination of the trenches along the escarpment and the uprooted ground on the shore of the lake was conducted by Major Kopeikin. This led to the recovery of a number of tiny black metallic-looking geometrically shaped particles of apparently artificial origin and 1 small piece of a thin metallic-looking foil-like substance 1 millimeter thick, 2 centimeters long, and a 0.5 centimeter wide, later found to be of the same composition as the black particles. These, along with a number of samples of the bright chrome-green colored ice and the black grains, were collected and subsequently sent to the Leningrad Technological Institute for analysis. The analysis produced the following results. A. The green ice, when melted, left behind a residue of string-like fiber. This fiber, when analyzed, yielded an unknown organic compound accompanied by the presence of small quantities of aluminum, calcium, barium, silicon, sodium, and titanium. B. The geometrically shaped metallic-appearing particles were found to be resistant to acid and high temperatures, and they were not radioactive, but they seemed to consist of a silicon-iron alloy in combination with lesser amounts of aluminum, lithium, titanium, and sodium. C. The foil-like substance appeared to be of the same composition as the larger particles. The noted Soviet geophysicist Professor Vladimir Sharonov of the Leningrad Technological Institute became so interested in this incident that he made arrangements to visit the isolated area himself. He based his conclusions on the above analysis as well as on the evidence at the collision site. Professor Sharonov expressed his opinion as follows. I do not believe that the object was a meteorite. The destruction and disturbance to the ground caused by falling meteorites was absent in this case. Specifically, a falling meteorite leaves a crater 2 to 5 times its size. In this case, no craters could be found. The descent of a meteorite is accompanied by clearly identifiable audible and visual effects. There were none in this case. Finally, the chemical substance left by meteorites in the ground was not present in this case. The grains found on the lake bottom, while unexplainable at the present time, were clearly of artificial origin. The possibility that the object may have been a regular aircraft or even an American spy plane, which was a normal reaction in the USSR, reconnoitering at a very low altitude in order to escape radar detection, was totally ruled out by Sharonov and by scientists at the Leningrad Institute. They concluded that no known aircraft could possibly have withstood such a heavy impact against frozen ground without suffering severe structural damage and losing significant numbers of its parts, which would have subsequently been located in the area. Professor Felix Ziegel is a respected Soviet space scientist and astronomer, and having written some 28 books on astronomy and astronautics and numerous scientific papers on these subjects, would seem to be eminently capable of and understandably careful in establishing the difference between aircraft, comets, and meteors. His own conclusions about the unidentified flying object of Lake Onega, based on his personal investigation of the case, is of considerable interest. He qualifies it as a space probe coming from another planet which had scraped the ground but managed to continue despite presumably superficial damage. He continues, it is the only such case on record within the territory of the USSR. Professor Ziegel, in his above observations, was obviously referring only to crash contacts and not the many sightings of UFOs over the USSR, including brief encounters with fighter planes, sometimes with fatal results for the Soviet pilots. Professor Alexander Kazantsev, a noted Russian scientific investigator and writer and a member of the Soviet Academy of Science, was somewhat more direct. It was obviously a space probe. If you tried to identify it as anything else, you would find that all evidence points to the contrary. Obviously, the files on the Onega mystery are far from closed. The Roswell and Lake Onega incidents seem to be coincidentally similar. Consider the ingredients: an unknown object flying east to west at an extremely low altitude and at very high speed. There occurs a collision or explosion, producing damage to the ground, uprooting vegetation, and, in the Lake Onega case, ice. Metallic-like debris is scattered over the area. No sound is heard except for that of the collision or impact or explosion, and the object remains in the air, still traveling west after its close encounter with the ground, although in the Roswell incident it crash-landed after the first malfunction. But did the Lake Onega object sustain enough damage to cause it to crash to the Earth and at some point farther to the west as the Roswell object seems to have done? Given the extremely vast area and small concentration of population in the area surrounding the Lake Onega impact site, such an event could easily have occurred and the resultant wreckage could still be awaiting discovery by some fur trapper, woodcutter, wandering tribesman, or possibly a member of a work gang. It is also possible, since the population is so sparse, that the wreckage of such an object, and possibly bodies of the crew that accompanied it, could have been detected and recovered by Soviet military units without the civilization population becoming aware of it, a situation certainly more likely in the USSR than in the United States, where the Roswell incident got announced in the press and on the radio before the news was circumvented by the authorities. For decades, the USA and the USSR have suspected each other of being the source of the unfathomable and persistent UFOs. A large segment of public opinion in both superpowers is now more or less convinced that our mysterious visitors really exist and that they come from somewhere else in space, or perhaps in time. Now, as both powers are beginning to explore our nearest neighbor in the cosmos, the moon, it would seem advisable that the two powers and others who eventually join the exploration of the moon share information attained, especially regarding the possibility of present or past life on the moon. There are persistent rumors that U.S. astronauts and Soviet cosmonauts have observed and photographed what appear to be constructions on the surface of the moon. These include walls, domes, bridge-like formations, spires, and spire-like pyramids estimated to be 150 feet high within the Sea of Storms, where Conrad and Gordon also observed something resembling a rectilinear wall. On the dark side of the moon, the Soviet Luna 9 reported geometric arrangements of huge stones, which, according to Professor Ivanov, a Soviet space scientist, could be flight markers for a lunar runway. Within the Sea of Tranquility, a number of sharp shadows seem to be caused by precipitous towering structures. One shadow described as indicating a tower-like formation as high as the Washington Monument. Still, another resembling a gigantic antenna at the edge of the Janssen crater is described as being of improbable height, with the added suggestion that it might be a gigantic electric pylon. Such rumors or reports have been, of course, regularly denied or, when already photographed, downgraded as perfectly natural formations. Astronomers and photo interpreters, understandably careful of their reputations, have explained the pyramids as shadows, the bridges and walls as curving ridges, the arrangement of stones as chance scattering of boulders, and the domes as the bubbling up of the moon's surface because of volcanic activity. But if this were truly the case, that the surface of the domes themselves would be the same color as the surrounding moonscape, and not, as they are, a translucent white. Further unexplained phenomena noted on the moon imply motion. One photograph, reportedly from the Apollo 11 mission, published in the United States, the United Kingdom, and other countries, shows two glowing, unidentified disks moving up from a moon crater. Sustained bursts of light and intermittent moon spots glowing in changing colors have long been observed on different parts of the moon by a large selection of astronomers observing from different parts of the Earth and at different times. These have been especially noted as coming from the Cobra's Head in Schroeder Valley and in the Aristarchus and Mascaline craters. The observed phenomenon of a curious silicon-like mist, occasionally seen rising from the surface of the moon, has been ascribed by one observer, considering the absence of water vapor, to the possibility that moon movers were digging in one of the craters. These last-mentioned phenomena, if further verified, would doubtlessly be ascribed to the still slightly active interior of the moon. If we adopt, however, the logical supposition that we are not alone in our galaxy, well, it is not too much an additional step of the imagination to speculate on the possibility of the use of the moon by unspecified others as a base from which to observe the Earth. The dark side of the moon presents several outstanding advantages to this end. It is shielded from radio interference from Earth, it has no climactic difficulties or corrosion problems, and as the largest moon in the solar system relative to the size of its planet, almost a sister planet to the Earth, it is conveniently near the developed planetary life existing on Earth. Physicist Stanton Friedman has suggested that perhaps the relatively small UFOs are exploration modules brought to the moon by larger craft from other points in this or other galaxies. The tens of thousands of UFOs that have been reported throughout the Earth began in 1947, shortly after the atomic bomb ushered in the era which might be labeled the end of cosmic isolation or the end of innocence. The proximity of intensive UFO sightings and past atomic bombings and continuing tests may have provoked a more lively interest in atomic activity on Earth on the part of our neighbors, if we take it for granted that they exist, in outer or inner space, and intensified their observations and patrols, especially over the extensive land areas where the great powers are busily preparing for atomic warfare. It is logical to consider that since the great number of sightings seem to have been noted over the USA and its adjoining oceans, and more recently, an increasing number over the plains and forests of the USSR, there should have been occasional malfunctions in the operations of UFOs over these two extensive world areas. While there seem to have been at least two instances that have left materials behind, there might have been still others that both sides are keeping secret from each other and from their own people. The danger of continued UFO secrecy, now being tested in the courts of the United States, is fairly obvious. Individual UFO malfunction resulting in large explosions or retaliatory attacks by UFOs could easily be attributed to the potential enemy action, since UFOs do not officially exist, and set off chain reactions leading to the use of nuclear warheads among the increasing number of nations possessing these weapons. The nations of the Earth owe it to themselves and each other to share information received on UFOs over the skies of Earth, as well as evidence of unidentified non-earthly activities in space. Werner von Braun, the noted father of rocketry who helped develop the V-2 for Germany in World War II and later the U.S. space shots, made a prophetic statement before his death about the pervasive but hard-to-establish quality of UFOs and their inference about extraterrestrial life. He said, "It is as impossible to confirm them in the present as it will be to deny them in the future. Let us hope that our present becomes our uncertain future. We will be ready to accept them in understanding and goodwill, and at the same time with the necessary technical preparation on Earth as well as in space. For this we need a common global space effort, a free exchange between scientific and technological establishments throughout the world. It will be necessary to share our knowledge and inventive techniques to inform the public of what is happening and to contribute as much as possible to a safe progression of our shared spaceship Earth through the dangers inherent in the cosmos. And while we do not yet know whether UFOs represent a danger, it is nevertheless self-evident as the great powers of Earth experiment with ever longer ranging missiles and with killer satellites that humanity represents a danger to itself in space as well as on Earth. The increasingly obvious presence of UFOs over the continents and oceans of Earth give us cause to reflect on the use we may make of our great advances in science developed in the last century and possibly now getting out of hand. Many motives have been ascribed to the senders or occupants of UFOs, mostly concerned with attack, exploitation, reconnaissance for conquest, capture of human specimens, or planned future occupation of the Earth, all of which mirror our own images of how we would react in their place. But possibly because of the danger we represent to ourselves and our surroundings, there may be another explanation. Perhaps what we call UFOs are part of a design or message whose meaning may become clear to us, one hopes, while there is still time. UFOs were really never new. Throughout history, whenever men watched the heavens, they saw or believed they saw flying figures, signs, portents, gods, angels, devils, ships, and in recent times, having lost an earlier faith, they have seen types of aircraft that apparently come from no earthly base. And somehow, somewhere, man lost God. We have no way of calculating how many of these visions have been caused by misinterpretation or productive imagination. However, if even 20% of these sightings are without earthly explanation, as has been suggested by the data in Air Force Project Blue Book, Special Report Number 14, then there must have been millions of unexplained visitors to the skies of Earth since the human species first began to record their impressions of celestial visitors. In ancient and medieval times, portents and objects in the sky were taken more or less as a matter of fact, perhaps because there was no known human air traffic at the time with which to confuse them. From ancient Egypt, we have a record that describes huge fiery circles coming from the evening sky, menacing Pharaoh as he stood in a chariot at the head of his army, maintaining throughout the incident, however, a commendable though puzzled sang-froid. The prophet Ezekiel may have had dealings with one and with its captain, whom he believed to be the Lord. A reading of the book of Ezekiel contains an excellent description of the landing of a space capsule, described in simple and understandable language. The ancient skies seemed to be filled with aerial travelers. The Assyrians saw flying bulls. Ancient Greeks and Arabs saw flying horses. The opulent Persians thought they saw flying carpets. And the warlike Romans watched flying shields and spears and whole battles in the sky at the very moment that they themselves were engaged in earthly combat. As the ancient world became Christianized, the aerial sightings became fiery crosses and other threatening signs of doom, foretelling plagues and disasters. The Emperor Constantine of Byzantium saw something in the sky before a battle that convinced him to become a Christian, considerably changing thereby the course of history. When the Renaissance opened up people's minds to the exploration of the world, UFOs appropriately took the forms of galleys and caravels. And then, as the French first began experimenting with balloons, certain vast globes were seen floating in the upper heavens, almost as monstrous reflections of what the French were doing. Starting in the late 1800s, relatively modern observers have described UFOs as flying spindles, cigars, and then airships moving at tremendous speeds. In World Wars I and II, they were taken to be some sort of unexplained weapon. World War II, for instance, called them Foo Fighters, which each side thought that the other was using. And it was not until 1947 that the greatly increased number of UFO sightings, at first described as metallic discs or pie pans, were given the name of flying saucers. It is possible that all these sightings throughout history, and to an increasing extent in the present, are all versions of the same phenomenon, aided perhaps by imagination and a penchant for seeing what one expects to see. This is why the Chinese have long thought that they have seen hurtling and luminous dragons, the ancient Hindus 2- and 3-decked aerial chariots, the Indians of the Americas saw great canoes, and tribes and nations in all parts of the earth, luminous monsters, demons, and gods. That comes from the Roswell Incident, the classic study of UFO contact by Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore. The name of this program is Omnibus Unlimited. Tonight's program dealt with the UFO Touch and Go at Lake Onega. My name is John Horrigan, producer and creator of Omnibus Unlimited, and my goal when I first started this series was to reevaluate and re-educate the people, including myself, concerning science, history, religion, and medicine. I maintain to this day that the only thing I learned in education that still maintains its validity is mathematics. When we first began to record this series, I was told that I would be subjecting myself to some ridicule. My response was, I don't have any credibility left to destroy. It's up to you, the listener, to decide whether, number one, in our primary concern with Omnibus Unlimited is there is a God. Why don't you play a little Jeopardy? Instead of asking the big questions, why don't you just superimpose answers and work backwards? Suppose there is a God. Suppose that Mother Mary is appearing around the world. Suppose Jesus is the Savior. Without bashing you with religious rhetoric, you have to concern the utmost, the supernatural. So we are being visited by these extraterrestrials. Yes, mankind has a predator. But what can we do? The answer is nothing. The inherent belief within all of us is to be good people, to do the right thing, not to harm others and to treat others as the way you would like to be treated yourself. That's the message that is forced on us by religion, but is the message we're hearing now from extraterrestrials. They're telling us, as E.T. said, be good. That's the pundits to this program have said, you're out of your mind. My response is, I'm closer to the truth than you are. I don't have all of the answers, but I'm certainly on my way. As the apocalypse or Armageddon approaches us, we are in tumultuous times. We must love our brothers and sisters. We must get along. We must pray to the deity, to the God, for there is one. Just look outside your window. What troubles me, though, is that wars are caused by two things. And number one, territorial disputes. And number two, religion. My God is better than your God. Or the way I worship my God is better than the way you worship your God. My response is all of the religions, every last one of them, whether it's a pagan ritual by Druids or if it's the most apostolic Catholic service, they all point to one. I need, as a Christian, Jesus to get to God. Whereas the Buddhist would need Buddha to get to God, or someone from the Islam tradition would need Muhammad, or someone from the Jewish tradition would need the prophet Elijah. That's just a vehicle to get us to God. If we understand that, if we be good, try to do the right things, then we'll be okay, because we're finding out more and more that indeed the body has a soul. There is an electromagnetic aura surrounding the body that leaves the body once it dies. If we know that there's an afterlife and that we're put here for a particular reason, we can each find our cog in time and space. We can find the reason for living and why we were put here on this earth. For now, we're finding out that there were monsters as well, that there are ghosts and spiritual entities. We really don't know much in mankind. We only know what is physical, and unfortunately, that retards our thinking. So as you lay your head down on the pillow tonight, or as you stare upwards into the dark, remember, they are watching, and there is nothing you can do about it except to be good. I'm John Horrigan. God bless. This is John Horrigan with a special report on this extended version of Omnibus Unlimited. From Natural or Supernatural, a casebook of true unexplained mysteries by Martin S. Caden, comes this ditty. Alien photographs. Photos of aliens from UFOs showed an alien being on an autopsy table, which is a metal table with runnels and traps underneath to trap the fluid and feces. The body appeared to be a little short of 4 feet. The table was about 7 feet. No clothing on body, no genitalia, body completely heterous, head was rounded cranium, slightly enlarged, eyes almost almond-shaped, slits where nose would be, extremely small mouth, receding chin line, holes where ears would be. The photo was taken at angle, side view, looking at body from 45-degree elevation, and the left hand was visible. The head was facing to the left, the body was right to left in position as far as the head was on the right and the feet on the left. The eyes were closed, and they were apparently oriental-looking and almond-shaped. The left hand was slightly longer than normal, the wrist coming just about 2 to 3 inches above the knees. Wrists appeared to be articulated in a fashion that allowed a double joint with 3-digit fingers. The wrist was very slender. There was no thumb. A palm was almost non-existent. The 3 fingers were direct extension from the wrist. Another photo reveals the photo taken of 3 live aliens. Very clear photo, aliens standing against a white tile wall, looking confused as if they had been shoved. They were looking in different directions. On May 22, 1950, an unnamed informant turned the original of this photograph over to Agent John Quinn of the New Orleans FBI field office, claiming he had purchased the photograph from another individual for the sum of $1,000 and was placing it in the hands of the government because it pictured a man from Mars in the United States. The picture, which purports to show an alien survivor of a UFO crash in the custody of 2 U.S. military policemen, reportedly first surfaced in Wiesbaden, Germany in the late 1940s, allegedly in the possession of a U.S. GI stationed there at the time. How he came into possession of such a picture remains unclear, as do the identities of the 2 soldiers portrayed, the location of the military base where the picture was allegedly taken, and the exact nature of the portable respiratory apparatus that is obviously being used to assist the aliens' breathing. The photo did receive limited publicity in West Germany in the late 1940s, although it was generally regarded with skepticism by U.S. officials of the then-existent Allied military government. Is this an alien from another world or an elaborate hoax? Well, this unfortunately poor quality photocopy of the photograph and the accompanying artist's interpretation without comment may or may not pertain to certain significant aspects of the Roswell Incident, which was a flying saucer crash in the late 1940s. Suppose it is a hoax. Why would they do it? Suppose it isn't. Doesn't that scare you?